We now want to bring in Susan Page, the Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today. And Susan, lots to get to. But with regard to the cabinet, we saw the president-elect add another very, very rich person and another general. What do you make of both appointments?
You know, it's interesting, the unprecedented number of generals that Donald Trump is tapping for top jobs in his administration, more than any administration in modern times. Also, the most billionaires. This is going to be the wealthiest cabinet in American history. And I think what both things tell us is these are the kind of personalities, kind of leaders that Donald Trump respects. Executive leaders, people who seem to be very confident and sure-footed, know what they think. Alpha males, maybe, although they're not all female, although they're not all male.
There's another way, I think, to look at it, too. Optics and loyalty. Another friend. I mean, the McMahon family donated millions of dollars to the Trump Foundation. So we see another insider, to a degree, appointed, and another general. It seems to just project this idea of strength, albeit another general. Donald Trump was very, very critical of the generals collectively during the campaign. He
said the generals, he knew more than the generals did about fighting ISIS, but that's not the direction he's taken in making appointments. You know, not surprising, I think, that presidents like loyalty around them. You know, the idea of a team of rivals, that is a rare leader who really wants to embrace having people who are going to be challenging him or not first loyal. Their first loyalty might not be to him. And, you know, Mitt Romney, if he appoints Mitt Romney as Secretary of State, that would be an example of appointing someone who was not with him during the campaign for a key job. That would be also interesting to watch.
What do you make of that? Again, our Major Garrett reporting that Mitt Romney is now a front runner. Obviously, there's some drama here that Donald Trump, if nothing else, seems not to be to not have a problem with, if nothing else. But what do you make of where that pick lies?
Willing at least to seriously consider him for the job. And of course, since the election, and especially in the last couple of weeks, Mitt Romney has gone out of his way to indicate he would be loyal to Donald Trump as president. So in that way, someone who wouldn't be disloyal, they wouldn't have to worry about a challenge. At least that's the signals that Mitt Romney has been sending. You talked about the optics. I think it shouldn't be a surprise to us that someone who was a star of reality TV, who has a big public image as a real estate mogul, would be sensitive to the optics of how these things look. And we know that he's talked about how Mitt Romney looks the part of a Secretary of State.
What about, you know, he was read a list, and while saying he had not crossed Mitt Romney's name off, he acknowledged he may have crossed others off. But then he added in an interview yesterday the name of Rex Tillerson, the ExxonMobil CEO. In the same way that Governor Branstad of Iowa is known to have a long relationship with Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, it's also known that Tillerson has a good working relationship with Russia, and specifically Vladimir Putin.
I wonder if this would not cause some concerns, both because he's been a business leader, not someone in government. Obviously, a lot of international relations involved in leading ExxonMobil, but also his relationship with Russia. This has been a subject of some concern for outside analysts about Donald Trump's own attitude toward Russia. And in fact, we heard yesterday Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, saying he is going to try to investigate Russia in terms of whether it tried to influence the American election, something that Donald Trump himself disputes.
Do you agree that David Petraeus, for any number of reasons, perhaps now has fallen off that short list?
You know, he slipped. We no longer hear his name being discussed in the serious way we did before. I think you have to be kind of cautious about saying someone's off the list until Donald Trump makes his appointment. But the interview that CBS had this morning with Paula Broadwell, I think, is not helpful for David Petraeus. It reminds everyone of the scandal that cost him his job at the CIA.
I think it also would suggest the confirmation hearing, perhaps, that we would see unfold. Scott Pruitt, named to lead the EPA, compared to putting an arsonist in charge of fighting fires. What does it say, if nothing else, about how the Trump administration, which has entertained Al Gore at Trump Tower, entertained Leonardo DiCaprio at Trump Tower? I know climate change, obviously very important to those two gentlemen, but what does it tell you about the administration's view of the environment?
So some environmentalists were heartened by the idea that Donald Trump was willing to meet with some leading advocates, people concerned about climate change, and said in that New York Times interview that there was some connectivity between human activity and the warming of the planet. But you're putting in charge of environmental policy a climate change skeptic who has taken the lead nationally in fighting EPA regulations on power plants. That's the guy who's going to be in day-to-day charge, working on regulations. That indicates, I think, tough times ahead for those who want to sustain the the programs on climate change that President Obama has put in place.
And specifically, we're talking about climate change, but it seems as though we've seen thus far with his appointments, regulations themselves are just going to be undone. It really does seem that this is now going to be the primary focus in those first 100 days, if you will.
And of course, regulations is something that you can attack as an administration without having Congress play a big role. There is a process in changing regulations, but there's a degree to which people who are head of agencies can slow down enforcement of regulations, can move to change the rules of the game, and that have huge consequences without having to go through Congress.
I'm going to get you out of here on this one very quickly. His use of Twitter has continued. Yesterday, in fact, Ari Fleischer tweeted, "I wonder if FDR was ever asked if he was going to continue to use the radio," seeming to just draw a comparison to a technological advancement, if you will. Is that the question, or is it how it's being used?
You know what? This is how he communicates with people. An aide said it was like owning the New York Times without the overhead. It is clear he's going to use Twitter as a big way to communicate with Americans and with reporters.
Reporters such as yourself, Susan Page, as always, we appreciate the insight.
Thank you.